The Missouri Tigers earned the commitment of Toni Bryant, a five-star forward from Florida, the second five-star commit for Missouri in the 2026 class, the only program in the entire country with multiple five stars in the class, one of only two programs with five-star commits in the class. Dennis Gates with another one of his biggest recruiting wins of his career here so far in Missouri, and one of the biggest all-time program commits for Missouri. Joey Van Zummeren, joined by Killian Wright here on Missouri Tigers on SI to talk about this commitment for the Tigers. Killian, first off, I mean, just what's your basic evaluation of where Toni is at and where he can be, the potential he has to develop into?
I mean, right now, he's just an athletic monster, which kind of puts you with an unlimited potential, honestly. If you've got the physical tools, you've got all the time in the world to put together the rest of the basketball skills. So as far as potential and upside, there might not have been anyone like this in the program for the past couple of years. Even someone like Jason Crow, who's obviously like the number a top 5 recruit in the nation, maybe still doesn't even have the pure raw upside that Toni Bryant has, just due to that athleticism. But overall, as a prospect, he's able to use that athleticism to be a really good and effective transition player on both sides of the ball, but really running up and down the court on offense. He looks really fluid as a mover. I think he's going to bring a lot as probably whenever he gets here, probably the number 2 or maybe number 3 scoring option on the team. I think he's going to play a big part in the team's identity of, there's a lot of ball pressure and running in transition, and he kind of unlocks that and become the face of it.
Yeah, I was going to say, with just that tempo that Missouri likes to play with, I think he's a really good fit for that with his skill set. So then, I mean, you were mentioning Jason in this. I mean, do you think, just what are your thoughts on how Jason and Toni could possibly complement each other next year?
Well, it's interesting because I think, at least in terms of last year's squad, there wasn't specifically a duo who played together. It was kind of more of a collective effort. You'd have Mark on the post ups, or sometimes getting that head of steam to the basket, and then kind of Grill doing his own thing, running around the perimeter. Tamar really doing his own thing in terms of the ISO scoring. So it felt like there wasn't really a time when it was like, whoa, this guy and this guy are playing together really, really well. I think there's a chance that we see this next season, as in the upcoming 25-26 season with Ant and Mark, and see how that pans out. And maybe that gives a little more insight to how potentially Crow and Toni could play off each other, given their kind of similar positions as the guard and an athletic forward. But in terms of Crow and Toni, I think it's interesting because I think Crow will really help to kind of elevate Bryant's game, and then obviously vice versa. But in terms of what Crow can do as a half-court creator, he's one of the best self-creators in the nation, and then he's obviously grown a lot more fluid in terms of running those pick and rolls or running the offensive sets himself and passing his teammates open. So I think that really helps, because right now I think Toni Bryant is more specifically of a play finisher and more of an off-ball guy, in terms of he's going to be able to cut, he's going to be able to finish lobs, he's going to be able to position himself in the right spot, whether it's the dunker spot or the nail, and then making the play to the basket. But I think overall it's going to be a lot of, all right, Jason, go initiate the offense. Let's go set something up, get you in a pick and roll with Toni, whether that ends up in Crow shooting the shot because Toni frees him up on a screen, or if it's going to be, hey, go hit Bryant on the roll of the basket and Bryant will finish the play. I think there's a chance that this is the most, how would I phrase it? This is the most like dynamic duo that the Tigers have had under Dennis Gates, and they haven't even taken the court yet. But I think once you actually see them on the court, you'll be able to tell that they'll be playing with each other more than a lot of the other, I guess, duos from Missouri have in recent years.
Right, and you mentioned, you hit it on it there. They haven't even hit the court yet, and I think obviously with the way recruiting works now, you really kind of got to hold your breath until they are out there for their first minute on the court. But we talked about it, especially after the commitment of Jason, of just what this 2026-27 season is shaping up to be. I mean, how much does Toni, if at all, kind of move the needle even farther than what we have with Jason, as far as what your outlook and expectations are for that next season?
Well, it's hard to tell, because I know we touched on this in the initial Crow reaction episode, but it's hard to tell how far a freshman is going to get you. obviously with one 5-star freshman, there's times it really works out. And there's times it just kind of, they're really great statistically, but it depends on how the team around them shapes up to be. I believe the examples I used last time were Trey Johnson and Jeremiah Fears from last year in the SEC. Really good scorers, efficient scorers, put themselves as lottery draft picks. So that's obviously something. But now that Crow has another guy alongside him, he's going to have Toni Bryant as another 5-star. Yes, they're both freshmen. They'll both be young. It'll be a relatively inexperienced group if it is just those two there. But I think having both of them together really boosts the chances of being able to compete. And then also a complete wild card who no one really knows as of now. I guess you'll have to wait until after the season if Anthony Robinson stays for his senior year or if he opts to go to the draft. There is definitely draft buzz for him, but he could stay around. And then you have more of a big three between Robinson, Crow, and Bryant. So that's something to keep an eye on. But I think even without Robinson, if it is just Crow and Bryant, I think there's a very real world where they can compete and potentially make Dennis Gates' deepest March Madness run, which would just be making it to the round of 32. But it would still be his deepest run. So overall, I mean, that would be a win in terms of the past few years.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because I think for Dennis Gates, like obviously right now this offseason is, I mean, I was going to say a complete and total win. I still think it's fine to label it as that, but as far as what he did in the transfer portal, there's going to be some people that are underwhelmed there, and it's really interesting. I'm really curious to see what the talk is like about Missouri heading into this season as we get closer on what the fan base is expecting, really, because I think it's going to be difficult to not just look ahead to next season. And also just as far as what it means for Dennis's, how he's evaluated. Because once Tony and Jason get here, even though for all the things you mentioned of having to be realistic of, these guys still are freshmen, although I will say that Tony is going to be turning 19 this year. He's going to be a older true freshman once he arrives to Missouri. Even with that in mind of, having to be realistic about those expectations, it's really going to be a big test for Missouri because, and Dennis Gates specifically, because even though that, these are huge wins on Dennis's resume, there's going to be the question still of, all right, now, are you able to develop that talent? Are you able to make the right coaching on-court decisions? Because, look, we've known Dennis Gates can recruit, even though these are by far the biggest wins of his time so far with Missouri. We've known he's been able to do this. He's been able to elevate Missouri with high school recruiting. Now the question becomes, what was a lot of people attributed the downfall of Missouri last year to, attributed that in large part to the on-court coaching decisions, the lineups. And so, Dennis has stuck by those, and we'll just have to see how that shakes up for him. And it's going to be really interesting, again, just to see how this conversation changes around Dennis. Killian, just what are your thoughts on what this means for Gates and kind of the future expectations for him?
I mean, you nailed it. That's been the thing with Dennis. Great recruiter, but what's going to happen on court? And I think next year, as in 25, 26, you mentioned a lot of people are going to be looking ahead. I think kind of no matter what happens, and barring like a 0-19 conference season again, I believe that he kind of gets a pass for next season. And that most eyes will just be, okay, whatever. The Tigers weren't very good. We'll move on. Let's see what happens with Tony and Jason Crow. So I think that's going to kind of be the mindset. I have no idea where the Tigers will stand next year. There's a lot of questions to be unanswered. So that's interesting. But in terms of Gates' future, I think he will need to do something big in the season when they get Crow and Toni Bryant. Obviously, we don't know what exactly that roster will look like now. It's still over a full year away from taking the court. But I think there's going to be very real pressure on Dennis Gates to make a Sweet 16 run, to make an Elite 8 run. I think most people are going to want to see multiple tournament wins out of Dennis Gates. And honestly, even though they're both freshmen, there's kind of he will have not very many excuses to not do so. It'll probably be the most talented roster he's had, assuming everything goes to plan. There will still be some returning veterans there. It's not like the entire team is going to be freshmen. I mean, the guys who are young now who could stick around for that season, doing it, T.O. Barrett, Trent Pierce, Trent Burns, Honor Boateng, these guys could be proven veteran upperclassmen by then. So there's a solid foundation to be built off of right now. And so I think all eyes will be on Dennis Gates in the 26-27 season, and he's got to get the job done.
For sure. And you would think next year that any transfers entering the portal would be pretty alluring to come to Missouri with the two freshmen they have in the class so far. Although there is the question of how, after these two guys, how much money does Missouri really have to spend after that? So interested to see just kind of how this all shakes up for Missouri's future. Just another piece of it. Again, they got to get to them actually coming to campus, getting them there, making sure they're all secured there. But this has been something Missouri's coaching staff has been working on a really long time, getting Toni Bryant to commit. Kyle Smith-Peters was a big part in this. I think Tim Fuller deserves another shout out, even though, you know, it was clear the role he played with Jason Crow more specifically. So, I mean, continuing to elevate this program. And again, as we've just talked about, the real question just becomes, okay, you're winning off the court. Can you win on it? Can you win more than some good games in the regular season and maybe one tournament game after that? So exciting stuff for this program. Killian, any final thoughts before we wrap up here?
No, I think you pretty much nailed it. It'll be a really big year once those guys do step foot on campus, assuming they do.
Right. Exactly. So that's all we got here over on Missouri Tigers on SI. Make sure to check out all the coverage we have for this big commitment over on the website. We have an analysis and news story as well to check out. So appreciate you tuning in.